I'm Dr. Adam Rutherford.
And I'm Dr. Hannah Fry.
And you are going to send us your everyday mysteries.
And we are going to investigate them.
Using the power of...
Science!
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 I like it.
Welcome to episode 2 of The Curious Cases of Rutherford and Fry with me, Dr. Hannah Fry.
And me, Dr. Adam Rutherford. This is a two-parter. One of my favourite subjects in all of science, why sex exists, the complexities of sexual reproduction, many of which are still utter mysteries.
Indeed they are. Now, in the first episode, we covered why do we even have sex at all? Why don't we just reproduce asexually?
Like the rotifords that we discussed in the first episode.
The cute little bugs.
Really, really cute. There are no rotifers in this episode. There are some very, very exotic and disturbing sexual practices, though.
There are. We have got some weird animal sex which involves stabbing and or eating your partner. And we would just like to point out very clearly that neither we nor BBC Radio 4 condone this kind of behaviour in humans. Let's just all agree that animals are weird.
Welcome back to the second instalment of the Enigma of Sex, based on this question sent in by Robert Turner from Leeds.
Why do we only have two sexes? And are there any anomalies in the animal kingdom?
Now, in the first part, we considered why we have different sexes at all, because, let's face it, some people claim life would be a lot easier with only one.
Which kind of works as an idea, as long as you don't mind being ravaged by disease, genetic mutations, and eventually extinction.
Anyway, in this episode, we're going to be asking why it takes two to tango, for humans anyway, when a line dance might be more fun, or maybe the hokey cokey.
Really stretching that dance analogy there, aren't you? Huh? Now, we are used to the idea of there being two sexes, male and female.
Yes, but if we have a good route around, you'll quickly find that the animal world is much more complicated than that. Take hermaphrodites, for example. That's animals with male and female parts in the same body. Worms, snails, sea stars, and more than 20 families of little fishies. Biologist Karin Bondar, author of The Nature of Sex, told me about the frankly bizarre and quite worrying things that these animals get up to, such as the aptly named nudibranchs.
One of the most extreme examples of a hermaphrodite comes from the sea slug world, and these are little tiny aquatic animals. They're actually very beautiful sea slugs. They are tremendous colors and shapes. Wow, these guys have incredible sex lives, let me tell you. In one specific species, scientists actually observed that the partner playing the male role would stab the receiving partner directly in the forehead with its penis. It turns out that the penis is actually stabbing directly over top of the cerebral ganglion of the receiving partner. And that is to deposit some neurochemicals directly to the brain of their partner. In some cases, it can make their partner act more like the female and give up their male role. In other cases, it can actually make their partner just not want to have sex anymore. They're called appeasement substances. And of course, this is good news for the partner that's already delivered their sperm, because they don't have it to compete with any other sperm that might make its way in there.
Right, this sea slug stabs and drugs its partner into submission.
Yeah, you see, it's more costly to be a female because you have to grow eggs and you have to rear the young, so it pays to be a male, even if you're a sea slug. Snails do it as well. They stab their partner with a love dart, which cements their role as male and discourages the female partner from mating again.
You know, this doesn't sound very fair to me.
Right. Well, before anyone starts to think that the patriarchy dominates the entire animal world, listen to this.
It seems like females get the short end of the stick, quite literally, so to speak, sometimes. However, there's a lot of ways that females hold the power, and we see this in some of the most extreme ways in animals that are sexually cannibalistic, where females will actually kill and consume their male partners. But male redbacks, this is a spider species in Australia, they've evolved a very interesting strategy where they will eventually lend themselves to being killed, because you've got to think, okay, these spiders might actually get only 1 or 2 chances to have sex in their entire lives. So they've really got to make these chances count. What they do in their first attempt is they will constrict the inner regions of their abdomen, kind of like a belt, cinching that up really, really tightly. And then they do this roll into the female's jaws where they try to copulate with her. And she'll, of course, try to bite him. But because he's done this constriction, which is actually functioned to keep all of his internal organs toward the center of his body and locate them away from where her jaws are sinking into his flesh, this allows him a second shot at it. Even though he might be wounded, the second time he just goes for broke and she will kill him. But he's been as reproductively successful as he could possibly be.
And they say romance is dead. Now, from an evolutionary point of view, this is a successful strategy.
That's correct. And the key part of that is that after you've let your sperm go, biologically speaking, he's done the best job he can do if she's busy and she's not getting another sexual partner right away. And the best way to keep her busy is to give her food. The best food to give her is your own body. In other cases, there's many other species where males, instead of their own bodies, will bring a female a nice gift, a food gift or a water gift of some kind. But in the extreme cases, it's just the quick and dirty example of, you know what, just eat me. I'm done.
Yes, it's a sort of extreme dating. You know, the whining and dining
Right?
going on there is, well, it's kind of terminal.
You know, sexually cannibalistic is maybe the least sexy phrase ever devised.
Well, not if you're a redback spider, though.
Okay, let's move on to more gentle behaviour. Consider the mushroom, because when it comes to sheer numbers, fungi are the clear winners. There may be as many as 5 million species of fungi. And as for number of sexes, they are also top of the league. Here's ecologist Lynn Boddy from Cardiff University with the racy sex life of fungi.
The ones which most people will be familiar with are the basidiomycetes. And those are things like mushrooms and the brackets you see on trees. Sometimes they form crusts and skins, or rusty patches or smutty patches. It's pretty safe to say that most basidiomycetes have hundreds of sexes. We often call them mating types rather than sexes because you'd have to think of an awful lot of names, wouldn't you? You couldn't just have male and female. You'd be thinking forever how many different names to give all these different sexes. So we usually just call them mating types. To the human eye, at any rate, the different sexes or mating types look identical. So there are not specific differences like we associate with males and females.
Okay, I'm trying to be super serious on this rather delicate scientific subject here, but seriously, did you just hear Professor Lynn Boddy say smutty patches?
We all heard it, Adam. Now, most of the fungus lives under the surface as a network of long-lined filaments, and the mushroomy bits that pop up, they're just the bulbous reproductive organs, like the alluring flowers of plants, and they release spores in order to reproduce. But it's a tough life for a tiny spore, trying to make it out in the wild.
It's a chancy business, being a spore, spreading around and hoping to land in the right place at the right time. Spores are usually spread by wind or sometimes by water and also by animals. Because that's risky, it's even more of a chancy business encountering another fungus of the same species with which you can mate. So if you only had 2 sexes in the way that we do as humans, you've only got probably a 50% chance of being able to mate successfully. But when there are hundreds of sexes, the chances of encountering another fungus with which you are sexually compatible is very high. You've almost got pretty close to 100% chance of being able to mate with whatever fungus of the same species you meet.
And they say romance is dead again. So, fungi have upped their number of sexes to increase the probability of successful reproduction and spreading their genes, because finding a mate is hard if you're a mushroom.
Yes, and here, my biological friend, is where we meet yet another mathematical problem with sex. Because it turns out that only having 2 sexes is the worst possible outcome for everyone. Imagine you are one of 100 heffalumps. The only rule is that a heffalump can't reproduce with another heffalump of the same sex. If each heffalump in the room is a different sex, so 100 sexes in all, then everyone can reproduce with everyone else. But if there were only 4 sexes, that would mean that you could only mate with 3/4 of the room. Having only 2 sexes then suddenly means that half of the heffalumps are off the table. And that is the worst odds that you can get.
Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us.
Heffalumps? Of all the creatures in actual creation, you went for heffalumps?
I didn't want it to be too, specific.
Okay, right. Anyway, I put this question of why we don't have more than 2 sexes in heffalumps and other creatures to our expert in the evolution of sexual reproduction, which is Chris Wilson from Imperial College London.
The problem here is that once you've got 2 sexes, it's really, really difficult for a third new sex to pop up and do well. So if we had a new intermediate sex, who is it going to mate with would be the question, because once you have males and females going, each of them has a whole suite of adaptations specifically to try and maximize their success with the other one. If you had a third sex, it would have great difficulty finding partners.
And it turns out that one of the reasons that we humans and other complex animals have gravitated towards 2 sexes is due to the size of our gametes. That's our reproductive cells, eggs, which are the biggest ones in the human body, and sperm, which are the littlest.
The basic problem is that sperm and eggs are the extreme ends of a continuum, and anything that deviates from those 2 extremes, very large gametes full of resources, very small gametes that move very quickly, would be at a disadvantage compared to the 2 that are there already. So in fungi, they don't have sperm and eggs, they are all the same size, and when you have gametes that are all the same size instead of little sperm and big eggs, then you can get extra sexes appearing. So in systems where we have 2 sexes based on sperm and eggs, that's the reason why it's very difficult to have a new one come about.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. We're not quite sure why 2 sexes evolved in the first place, but we think that once there were 2, it's difficult to add more.
Yeah, I mean, this really is one of the most difficult areas in evolutionary biology. But one of the ideas is that sperm and egg provide different biological imperatives for males and females, because sperm are very fast and small and eggs are very large and stable and full of resources. So that pairing works really well, like a lock and a key. And once you've got a lock and a key, you don't really need any other parts.
So, Dr. Rutherford, when it comes to why we have 2 sexes, can we say case solved?
Well, ish. It's true for us, but some animals have both sexes in the same body.
And others, like fungi, have hundreds of different mating types.
However, when it comes to humans, a clue could be down to the extreme size difference in sperm and eggs, the smallest and the biggest cells in our bodies.
But sex remains one of the biggest problems for biologists everywhere, doesn't it, Adam?
Scientific problems, you mean?
I know what I said.
Right, so there you go. We've absolutely nailed our current understanding of the complexities of sexual reproduction.
Done.
Yeah.
I mean, the biologists can give up now.
They pretty much can. The truth is that this one of the reasons why I enjoyed this programme more than all of them, which I love doing all of them, is that genuinely we don't really know what the answer to this is.
Well, I can lay testament to that, because during one of our research and scripting meetings, I witnessed Adam Rutherford talking for, I would say, about an hour and a quarter. Arguing, really, for an hour and a quarter with 2 different experts in this field about whether or not we could answer this question at all.
Yeah, and the conclusion we came to was not really, but that's good. I mean, that makes it a really, really good scientific question, one that is actively being researched at the moment. Some of the complexities that we didn't really get into because they're ridiculously complex to explain are to do with this idea that eggs contain lots of extra genetic information in the form of mitochondria, which sperm don't have. So there's uniparental inheritance of a particular bit. You're glazing
I know,
over as I'm
desperately
speaking.
trying to keep up a tally of the number of words that I don't know what they mean.
Anyway, the point is that when I started reading some of the literature on this, which I haven't looked at for a couple of years now, some of it by an old supervisor of mine, I just didn't really understand it. Because it's really hard.
No, but this is genuinely, science doesn't have an answer to this. And we say this every time that this happens, that actually this is a much fairer representation of what real science is like. there isn't an answer in the back of the textbook. Sometimes we just don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Now, sexual reproduction is a huge field within evolutionary biology, not just because it's a big problem, but because it's super diverse. And we've talked about some of the weirdness and the diversity in some of the more crazy stories of various animals. What we didn't get into was talking about how sex is actually determined. We know this for us very well, that men have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, and women have 2 X chromosomes. Yes. And in an egg cell, you have 1 X, and in a sperm, you either have a Y or an X. And when they meet, you either get a boy or a girl.
But
that's only one way of doing it.
But that is not what happens in every creature. Because back when I went to visit London Zoo, herpetologist, that's reptile keeper to you and me, Chris Michaels, showed me a couple of his crocodiles.
Female crocodiles build a nest, which is basically a giant compost heap. She lays her eggs in there, a few dozen eggs, and the temperature that they incubate at influences the sex. So at lower temperatures, sort of around 30 to 31 for Philippine crocodiles, you tend to get females. If you bump up the temperatures to about 33, you tend to get males. And if you go somewhere between those 2 first temperature points, you get a proportion of males and females equivalent to the temperature.
Does she lay more than 1 egg at once?
Yes, so she'll lay a whole clutch, several dozen eggs.
And they all come out as the same sex if the temperature is right?
Yes, but the nest will have difference in temperature. Remember, the difference that we're talking about are a couple of degrees. So if the eggs in the middle of the nest may be slightly warmer, they may be more likely to be male. The ones slightly further out are likely to be female. There is some suggestion that they can probably actually choose the proportions. So in the southern states of the US, when American alligators were hunted to the brink of extinction in the last century, but it looks like what probably happened is the females responded to the fact that there was very low population density by increasing the number of females in their nests by building them such that they were slightly cooler. And that meant that because you had a skewed sex ratio towards females, reproduction was much faster and the populations recovered quicker.
That is amazing.
Obviously, this is all based on historic data, but it's not a case of, well, I just build my nest and then whatever happens, happens. Is that they have some sort of feedback where they're able to adjust the way they build a nest and the places they put it to control the temperatures inside.
Completely brilliant. That's called temperature-dependent sex determination. It's one of several forms of environmentally determined sex determination. But there are plenty of other ways, and in fact, ways that you can change your sex. So here is one of our contributors, one of my favourite scientists, Aoife McClysett.
So there's also what they call social, where you can see sometimes if you have a school of fish, you can have schools of fish where there would typically be all female except for one male. And if that male dies, one of the females becomes male. And so it's a social cue somehow with the absence of any other males around. So a lot of fish can do that. But in some fish, it's a social cue. So it's just the absence of any other male. Then one of the females will become male. Sometimes it's just a maturity thing. So it's a bit like adolescence for us, if you see what I mean. That, there's a lot of changes that happen once you reach a certain maturity and a certain size. And for some species of fish, those changes involve changing sex.
There you go. So yet another extraordinary set of ways.
Now, one of those fish that Aoife was talking about there, she told me later, is the clownfish, which is of course, the central characters in the film Finding Nemo. Now, when the female of the group disappears or dies, as she does, the mother disappears at the very beginning of the film, then what would happen is that the eldest fish in the group, namely Nemo's father, is he called Marlin, something like that?
Yeah.
He then becomes Nemo's mum, and Nemo has sex with him.
No, he doesn't become his mum. He becomes the matriarch. He can't become the mum. It's the next
Whatever.
ranking
the
male.
weird bit about that was not the role that he played in Nemo's parenting. It was the fact that he changes sex, and then Nemo has sex with him.
Yeah. That is a different film, isn't it?
Quite a different film. I don't know why they didn't think that was appropriate for children.
I'd like to see that. I'd pay good money to see that version. Finding Nemo. Maybe.
Now, Finding Nemo.
There's one more thing that I want to say before we get on to our destiny, which is to talk about the next Curio of the Week, which is that Michelle did an outstanding job of musical choices in those last two episodes.
I totally agree.
We had some Marvin Gaye.
Bill Withers.
Now, Bill Withers, I want to specifically mention Bill Withers because is the punchline to one of my favourite jokes of all time.
Go on, tell us your favourite joke of all time.
How do you turn a duck into a soul singer? Stick it in the oven and wait until it's Bill Withers.
That is barely dad joke level.
That's brilliant. It's Bill Withers. Should we do Curio of the Week?
I think we should, yeah.
Rutherford and Fry's Curio of the Week.
We got a couple of contenders for Curio of the Week this week. Contender number 1 in the blue corner is Alan Warner. Now, Alan Warner sent in a message. Hang on a second. This is what Alan Warner sent. See if you can guess why Michelle thinks that he should be a contender for Curio of the Week.
Okay, sorry. So she sprung these on us. We haven't actually read these
She
yet.
just handed them to us on a piece of paper. Alan Warner says, having just binged on all 8 series on my POM commute from Geelong to Melbourne.
I didn't understand any of those words.
I'm not even sure if I said them correctly.
But binging on 8 series...
That's pretty impressive.
Alan Warner, I think, is a cricketer.
Yeah, hold on, though. Hold on.
All right.
I must now wait patiently, like a Satsuma for spare electrons for Series 9. P.S. You are both cool.
Yay.
Thank you. Yeah. But Michelle is probably cooler.
What?
And then he's got a little cool emoji.
What's that emoji? What?
I mean, I can say as a point of fact that Michelle is definitely not cooler than we are.
She's in control of what we actually say, though. All right, well done, Alan, we think. I don't know, that's just weird. The second one came from Marine Daru, and she said, whilst I really like both Adam and Hannah, I feel like, what? I think Michelle might be my favourite. Interviewing Terry the astronaut and making the show sound the way it does definitely deserves the top recognition. Plus, I really relate to getting lost all the time, even on my way home. Smiley face, smiley face.
Well, I'm afraid we haven't got a Curio of the Week this week.
Sorry, unfortunately there were no suitable contenders for Curio of the Week. See you next week.
This is the BBC.
Hello, all you curious people. I'm Jim Al-Khalili, and I just want to remind you that all the scientists of these curious cases don't just exist to answer your questions. They're people. They have lives too. For the past 7 years, I've made it my business to find out about the life scientific. What makes someone want to become a world authority on fungi sex or quantum gravity? And I've cross-examined many of the experts on these curious cases. So if you want to find out who these people are and what they do, you might like to give the Life Scientific podcast a listen. See what you think.